But welcome here to First Unitarian of Honolulu's evening Pauhana every Tuesday night. This is sadly the last Pauhana I'll be doing, as this is my last week as your minister. And one of the things I really wanted to do was bring back just one of my favorite people. I'm just playing favorites my last week because I get to. And also one of our favorite ministers we've had come join us, the wonderful Reverend Rosemary Bray-McNatt. So, hi, Reverend Rosemary.
Hello, Reverend TJ. It is lovely to see you. I am sorry that you are leaving.
Yes.
But I understand that that happens, and I'm sure that your folks get it. It's just harder, and so I see head shaking like, no, I don't get it. Nope. Yeah, it's one of the hardest things we do as ministers is to say goodbye to our people. So for those folks who are like, you know, not as into us as some of the other people, they don't necessarily start shaking their heads. But I think those kinds of people, or folks who are just not into congregational life, don't really get how involved and committed we are as ministers. I remember I did a sermon about this as I was leaving my congregation, because I wanted them to understand. In some ways, you all are the first people we think about in the morning and the last people we think about at night. Yes. You're always in our head, always. And we're wondering about you and worrying how this thing turned out that you told us 3 weeks ago and we hadn't heard from you. And, you know, we know you went into the hospital and we're not sure how everything turned out. And it's just this, it's this abiding presence in our lives as ministers. And so we know that it's hard for you when we leave, but it's hard for us when we leave because we can't talk to you, you know, for years. You know, I've been gone 8 years from my congregation, and truthfully, only now do I feel comfortable about talking to people that I was there with, because what I didn't want to do was interfere with the next minister's capacity to have that same kind of bond with you, because what we want more than anything is for you all to feel cared for and seen by the next person in the same way you were cared for and seen by us. And that takes time. And if we're in the middle of it, digging around, it takes less time. You know, it takes more time rather. It's just harder to do. So I know you didn't ask me to say that, TJ, but I just thought maybe because I was thinking of it, that I would just talk about it. So just know, as hard, it's a different kind of hard for TJ, but it's still hard. Speaking for TJ for a moment, without his permission.
I've never looked better or sounded better than that. So I appreciate you. Yeah, I mean, since you kind of brought it up, I mean, one of the things I was going to say is, what would you tell our good people here, about, one of the things people have had a question about is, what's next? Like what folks are out there, who's coming out of seminary, like what are they looking for? I mean, I think people doing the search process are really kind of curious about, it's been a while since the weird kid from Portland stumbled into Honolulu, and so can you say
how long have it been? How long have you been there?
It was 5 years. So wow. 2017. Yeah. But you're the president of one of our premier seminaries, and just what do you see coming out? Like, what are folks looking for? And does that make sense? Can you say something?
It does.
Young ministers. Yeah.
Young ministers, and that's a misnomer because some of our ministers are young and some of our ministers are not so young.
Right.
They, have a second career here ahead of them. A lot of mid-career people who switched to become ministers seem to be the people more interested in parish ministry. People who are younger want to try their hand at some other stuff first. They want to do chaplaincy, a lot of them, not all of them. We have a couple of folks in their late 20s who are committed to parish life, right? But I think that, especially at Star King, we have folks who want to try to do the nonprofit world, the nonprofit social justice world. They want to give that a try because, you know, we emphasize, even for our parish ministers, what we call sacred social change. Our whole idea is to how to talk about how we make a difference in the world with the principles of Unitarian Universalism and multi-religious life in play all the time. And we know from experience that that takes a lot of different faces and expressions. We have a small subset of people who do ministry in the military, which used to be a thing that no one could possibly imagine, until people began to understand that there are all kinds of people in the military. And there are literally thousands and thousands of liberal religious people, spiritual but not religious people, who serve in the military, who have almost no spiritual support because most traditional chaplains are evangelical Christians. And once we began to understand that, and once we began to get applications from people who had already been in the military and left, particularly so they could go train and go back to serve. And in fact, the Department of Ministry co-chair for a couple of years now has been the head of the National Association of Chaplains that serve in the military, which is a really important thing to do because it helps make room for all the other folks that evangelical Christians don't make room for. She's the person that made it possible for a deceased military veteran to have a chalice on their gravestone in military ceremonies and in military cemeteries. And that sounds like a small thing, but it's not a small thing if you died in combat and you want a representation of your faith tradition. And it took years for that to happen. So we have all these different people trying to do a variety of things. The folks who want to do parish ministry are looking for congregations that want to partner with them in this change work, who are willing to be disruptive and disrupted a little bit. I don't think it's an accident. Let me rewind. For the first time in many years, there is a shortage of ministers. And that has to do with the Great Resignation. The Great Resignation has affected churches just like it's affected everything else. People have said, you know what? I've done this long enough. I'm going to take a nap, right? Or they are at retirement age and they delayed retirement age because of the pandemic, because they wouldn't leave their people in the middle of a pandemic. There's a big chunk of people who would have left earlier and spaced this out more, but they couldn't leave their folks in the middle of this national trauma. So now that people are back out into the world advisedly, I say that as a person who just got over COVID. I just got it.
Yeah.
And I did so well. I mean, I didn't go anywhere. And we had graduation and I got it.
Yeah.
So these are folks who weren't going to leave their churches until the worst was over. And so for better or for worse, the worst is kind of over, we think. And these are folks who said, I got to go. So there aren't a lot of people yet to take their place. And even people who have retired and who are willing to do interim ministry are not, there are not enough of them either, right? So there are still people looking for congregation. Their congregations are still looking for ministers right now. I don't believe that this will last. I believe that it will do what it's always done. It goes back and forth all the time. But for those churches and communities that are looking for ministers, I think that the impetus for change, for getting serious about the counter-oppressive, anti-racist work that people and the movement has been doing for a while. The congregations that can do that are congregations that have a leg up, right? The congregations that are not embroiled in fighting and, you know, territorial things, they have a leg up. They have a leg up. The congregations that are still mired in the same old stuff that people were doing in the 80s and the 90s and the resistance and the stuff, they're going to have a hard time. They're going to have a hard time. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks. It was very clear.
I mean, I think about this stuff a lot because, you know, I got students ask me, what am I going to do? Am I going to get a job? They're going to get a job. The question is, are they going to be able to keep that job?
Now, here's the question that, and it's what I've been saying, because it worked for me, is that how, and I realize there's a little bit of Hawaiian exceptionalism going on here, but how does this apply to an opening in Hawaii, in your opinion? And in your experience?
So for me, for example, for me, at this point in my life, I would never come to Hawaii for a settlement. And I wouldn't because I have family that are already too far away from me with my living in California. When my mom was dying, I had to fly home 4 hours each way every month so that I could relieve my sister in Chicago, right? So I still have brothers and sisters in Chicago and family. And when I finally retire, I'm going to go to Chicago to live because I can't afford to go to New York. If I could afford to go to New York, I'd go right back, but I can't. I think people who have fewer ties will be drawn to it, or people who want a brand new start, like if they're young and they want to start a family and they want to come to this place and do these great things, I think that it will be an adventure for them and a lot of fun. You know, I don't know that I wouldn't have done this when I first started in ministry. If I'd had a chance to come to Hawaii, I might have come. Yeah. I might. Mike was here though. Mike, is that you? Because I can, yes. Hi, Mike. You were here, so I couldn't. I wasn't going to just kick you out. Hi, Nancy. So I think that people have to be at a very particular part in their life to do it. But having said that, there are worse places to live in Honolulu, okay?
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at that. This is just us talking here, even though it'll go live. But I was looking at that list of other places looking, and I was like, oh, those poor blessed people. Like, I don't know when they're going to find someone in some of those places.
Some of those places, I mean, some people really love small town life.
Absolutely. I get it.
And that's going to be great for them. I am not that person. I'm a city person. And one of the things that surprised me most when I came to Honolulu, I was like, oh, this is a city. Because, you know, whenever you think about Hawaii, you think about all these jungles and trees and this fabulous waterfalls and stuff. And it's not like that stuff doesn't exist. But this was Honolulu was a city. I was like, I love this. This is good. I mean, I had a better time even than I thought I would because it was city life and I'm a city person. Mm-hmm. But there are people who want nothing to do with city life. And for some of those smaller congregations, it's going to be perfect for them.
Yeah.
You know,
there's something like we ate at Cocoa Head Cafe, and there's something about eating at this phenomenal restaurant.
Yep.
That is 10 minutes from beautiful waterfalls. Like,
that's right.
It's like cognitively hard to explain to someone that feeling, you know?
Yeah. It's a really rich mix. You know, you get this beautiful scenery. You get to go to these incredible beaches. You can look at all this stuff. And then you get this fabulous food, right? And then there's these fabulous museums that you can go to. And then there's all this shopping. And the biggest mall I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah.
I know people said that it's not bigger than the Mall of America, but I don't believe them.
No, it is.
I don't believe them because I've been to the Mall of America and I wasn't as tired as I was going through y'all's mall. That mall was enormous. We were there all day because we just couldn't believe it.
Yeah. And it's all indoor, outdoor, it rains, and you're just like, it's raining on me in a mall. Okay, I'm gonna have to
Exactly.
dress myself
We
out.
were like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's beautiful and it's fun. And I think it's going to be just right for somebody.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. Someone asked me, do you know if there's any seminarians who are from Hawaii?
I don't.
Yeah.
That's a really wonderful question. I do not know the answer to that question.
Maybe
Now, of course,
someday.
I've got to go look.
Yeah. We'll see. We got to hatch some more seminarians out of here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
I've always thought about, me and Brandon Duran at Central Union have always talked about why there isn't like, why some seminary hasn't at least done like set up a 1-year residency in Hawaii, like where you do 3 years, but one of the years, if you're interested in say like cross-cultural or some other kind of cultural exchange kind of idea in ministry, that there should be something in Hawaii that is a seminary, but there's not. There is no
are
seminary.
there no seminaries in Hawaii at all?
Nope.
Get
Not
out of here.
none that are anywhere close to mainline. Yeah, there's nothing. Yeah.
Wow.
I always thought that Andover, Newton, and Yale should set it up just to make up for the damage they did.
Why, yes.
I mean, I don't think
That
it would
was
be
a
hard.
mess.
I don't think it would be hard to sell them on setting something up like that has a 1-year exchange. Use some of the faculty, like people here who are faculty. I mean, the religious studies and women's studies department at UH is ridiculous. It's filled with scholars of religion who could teach.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
I'm
is
not.
so interesting.
I don't mean to be pitching the president of one of our seminaries. I really wasn't intending to do that.
No, I understand that, but I'm always one of those people who's like, who wants to hear about ideas that people have. There's always something cooking in my head anyway. They don't always, the things I get in my head don't always work, but I like having a steady stream of ideas because this is kind of interesting.
Because we have a friend, Cassie Chi. She's in the UCC formation process, and there's really no one around. She's like, and she's very liberal, you know, but she has like
colleagues are very close to us. They really are.
Yeah. And so she has friends, but she doesn't have any training. Anyway, so I've always thought this would be a great place to have a seminary, or at least some kind of seminary program.
I tuck that back in my head and see what's up with that. Yeah. So what are people up to?
What are people up to? So now Reverend Rosemary's turning it around. What are people doing this summer? I think.
And what was it like for you during this pandemic? Did you feel more or less isolated being in Honolulu? Did you get off the island? You know.
I mean, I have some of my answers. Anyone want to chime in? What did people get up to? You can just speak up and start talking.
Oh, okay. Well, I just say thank goodness for being outside all the time. We got a group together and we walk Ho'omaluhia, which is a botanical garden on the windward side. And every Monday morning for the last 2+ years, we've between 5 and 15 women have been walking and meeting and talking a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's probably going to still go on forever, you know, because
I was going to say, I bet that won't stop.
No, it's not going to stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
We've said many, many times that we feel so lucky that we had Hawaii to spend the pandemic in. I can't imagine a better place to have lived through this 2 years of pandemic than here in Hawaii. I mean, we have wonderful weather. We have all kinds of outdoor activities, and we don't have a lot of that political controversy over things like mask wearing. You know, this is an island. People here have an island mentality. We're all in the same place, and there was just never any question. Okay, we got to put masks on. Everybody put masks on.
Right.
It just wasn't a big deal. So there's been a much more of, I think, a feeling of cohesiveness and unity than you would have found most other places. Yeah.
That's a really good point. You know, I think we were kind of spoiled here too, because the Bay is like that. It's not that there are not people who wanted to make a big political issue about, something that is basic community care, in my view. You put a mask on, not just for yourself, but for the other people who can't be vaccinated and all that stuff. And that was largely how people felt here. In fact, there are still people here, a lot of us, who are still wearing our masks. Can't be vaccinated.
Here too. I still put on my mask when I go to
I do
law
too.
or anything. I'm like,
Apparently
why?
didn't do me any good. I got COVID anyway, but I put it on, and at least I think I slowed it down from maybe getting to somebody else. You think about the folks who cannot be vaccinated, for all kinds of reasons, or for whom it didn't work as well. I was grateful that I was here, and that it was not a political issue in the same way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I was going to play off of what Mike said. I appreciate being here because of all the mask mandates. And when I went to California in November, it was scary to me. And I call it, like so many of us, one of the few people that had on a mask, because people weren't wearing masks.
Where were you in California?
I was up in the wine country and up above Sacramento, and I was different places in that kind of central, I guess you'll call it. And
Central California, they wanted no part of it.
And I don't care if I'm the only one, but I certainly, with our mentality here, I wasn't going to take my mask off when nobody else was wearing one. That was scary. And so I've appreciated living here and having it be mandated and important. And I haven't been sick in over 2 years, so I guess it works.
Bob's mother died about a year ago, but we were going back to North Carolina to see her and to take care of her. And I have to tell you, that's the most scared I've been since the pandemic began, because we got off the plane and nobody was wearing a mask. Nobody anywhere. Now, because Bob's mother was sick and because the people who helped take care of her were wearing masks, and because Bob's family is of a certain age now, we were all wearing masks. When we had to go into town to fill prescriptions, nobody anywhere. I was terrified. I was like, what is this?
Yeah, I traveled some and had some surprising experiences. I didn't travel that much though, but
right.
Yeah, so I did just go to Maui, which is where I'm wondering if I got COVID. So we'll see. But,
oh dear, yeah, that's possible.
Yeah.
Ew.
But yeah.
I should mention as well our abundance of outdoor restaurants. Any restaurant that had any capability of putting tables outside did. And while you were reluctant to go into an indoor restaurant, the outdoor restaurants were usually there in abundance. So that kept them afloat, and it kept us out and able to socialize and support them at the same time. A lot of takeout too, of course.
Oh my gosh, so much takeout. So much takeout.
So that's kind of how we fared. Mostly pretty, we did all right health-wise. We had a few people get it. Most of the cases were not unserious,
Right.
but yeah, I think compared to a lot of folks, we did okay. So
that's good. That's a blessing.
Yeah.
Is anybody going to General Assembly in Portland?
Let's see. I will be in Portland. Carol's raising her hand. Bill Scarvey's raising his hand. And
Allison is raising her
hand. Amy, are you going to GA?
No, I got a job. I'm employed now. Hello.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Where are you working?
Summer fun hit ya elementary.
Oh, that's awesome. So you're back in Hawaii right now, just judging by the amount of sun.
Yes. Thankfully. Yeah.
You're not going to invade the Maple Room.
No, not this year. It was a beautiful moment of spontaneity
Yeah.
and joy.
All right. Well, fair. Well, I'm kind of invading GA. I'm not registering, but I'm just going.
You're just going.
Because I'm technically going to be on sabbatical, so I'll just be in Portland. Are you going?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
You know, it's my responsibility to go. And we do a president's lecture every year.
Right.
And I'm going to be doing it with Julie Taylor at Meadville Lombard, and we're going to be talking about collective trauma.
Okay.
With the pandemic as our sort of theme. Julie and I have known each other for 20 years. Actually, we've met more than that. Yeah, we met at Ground Zero.
Oh, yeah.
And it sort of launched us both on this path of trauma ministry and disaster ministry by working at Ground Zero in the Red Zone. We both worked Respite One, which was where the Verizon and construction workers were. And I was talking about this today because I was trying to explain to someone that until that moment, it would never have occurred to me in life that I would do trauma ministry or disaster ministry, because it was all I could do to finish CPE. The idea of having to do CPE was so terrifying to me that I thought I wasn't going to make it through.
Not everyone knows what
I
CPE
didn't know.
is. Sorry, could you just?
I'm sorry. Clinical pastoral education.
Yeah.
Some of us call it boot camp for ministers. The most traditional clinical pastoral education is 10 weeks in a hospital setting as a chaplain. There are different kinds of CPE now. There are extended units where you can do it over an entire semester, where you only spend a certain amount of time in a hospital, or you do it at a nursing home or some other kind of institutional setting. But the sort of hardcore basic CPE initial unit is 10 weeks or 400 clinical hours in a hospital. I was at Wake Forest Hospital in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It's the biggest level 1 trauma center in the South till you get to Atlanta. And I probably would not have applied there if I hadn't needed someone to watch my kids while I was doing CPE. I only applied to Winston-Salem and Chicago because my mother and my family lived in Chicago, and Bob's family lived in North Carolina, 45 minutes from there. And so my thing was, since I had to do CPE, I was going to go to the first place that accepted me. And I went over Christmas vacation to interview, and they accepted me on the spot. So that's how I ended up there for the summer. And it's actually where I really became a minister. Like, I could preach and I could do all that other stuff, but I didn't become a minister until I did CPE. It was so horrifying to me the first few weeks that I actually called my intern supervisor, Charlie Ortman, on the phone crying and saying I couldn't possibly do this. There was no way. Charlie, poor Charlie, Molly.
Yeah.
Charlie, I cried so much my first year. I had a 2-year part-time internship because I had babies. Like, literally, my first year, I was bringing Daniel to church in an infant carrier, right? Yeah. So I had to get special dispensation from the Department of Ministry, because you're supposed to do your internship in one big chunk, just like you do your CPE in one big chunk. And I couldn't, because I was in school and I had babies and all other stuff. But I spent I put CPE in between the first and the second year. And I did the whole first year crying. It was so bad. Every time, like, Charlie would send me to the hospital, and I'd go to the hospital and see somebody, and then I'd come back and I'd be crying, and Charlie would have to talk to me. It was a lot. But CPE is where I understood I had to formulate my own spirituality. I had to identify for real what was happening for me. And I realized that one of the reasons I was crying so much was because it was so sad. I was so empathetic, and I felt so useless. Because to me, these people didn't need me. They needed doctors.
That's a shoe covering that's short for spatter down.
They needed doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists. They didn't need me. I had nothing to offer. And so I was really struggling. And I'll tell you the story of when I stopped struggling. I was on call, because you roughly did an on-call thing every 10 days.
Yeah, every
Right?
2 weeks, 10 days. Yeah.
Yeah, every week to 10 days. You were on call from 5 p.m. until 8 a.m. the next day.
With the beeper.
With the beeper. And
I've
then
never
you start
slept
dreaming.
well.
Did you dream about the beeper going off while you
I
were
still
sleeping?
dream about the beeper going off, Rosemary.
Oh my God. I dreamed about this beeper going off, and then I'd wake up and it wasn't the beeper, it was the beeper in my dream. Then I'd try to go back to sleep, and it was just, oh.
Yeah.
And they have a little room for you to sleep, allegedly, right? And the first thing they tell you is, because you go to try to get dinner and they'd say, don't get dinner in a plate. I remember getting a plate that says, you don't need to do that. You need to put that in a to-go, because you're never going to finish a meal. And it was the truth. I never did. And for that period of time, you're the only chaplain on duty in a hospital that is a level 1 trauma center that's full of people, right? So this particular night, I sit down with my little, takeout. I did maybe 3 bites, and I get a call. I get a beep, and it's the people in the emergency room, and they say there's a guy here who wants a portable DNR. Now, in North Carolina, you could get a portable DNR. And I said, did you search this guy for weapons? And they're like, I don't know why I asked that, but I just did. And he said, why? I said, because if he wants a portable DNR, he wants to die. And if he wants to die, I want to make sure that he doesn't want to take me with him before I come down there. He didn't have a gun, but he was distraught. It turned out that he had gotten an HIV diagnosis. He was Black, he was gay, he was closeted. He hadn't been to church in years. I wanted him to stay and talk to me. He said he wanted to go home and get his partner to talk, because both of them were HIV positive, and he didn't know what to do. And, I asked him, have you been thinking about killing yourself? And he looked at me and he said, you're not supposed to ask me that. I said, yeah, I am. I'm going to ask you that. And it turned out that he wanted the portable DNR because he had been saving up pain medication from a previous injury. And he had planned to take all of the medication and lay the DNR on his chest so that they wouldn't revive him. And because we didn't give him a portable DNR, he said he was going to go home and talk. And I was just so afraid he would never come back. And while I'm talking to him, my beeper goes off again, right? And I tell him that I will be on call all night. And if he wants to come back to the hospital, he can. So I run upstairs, and I'm up in the intensive care ward, and I go into this room. And there's a young woman lying in bed. There is a couple standing on one side with the Bible praying over her, a guy next to her on his knees sobbing, and a woman up against the wall. She looks at me, throws herself into my arms, and starts sobbing. She's 31 years old. She has a baby, and she has Hodgkin's disease, and they can't control what's happening. So they were expecting her to die, and they just didn't know what to do. And so they called the chaplain. And so I got people settled, and, I prayed with them. And then I kind of got the mother. There was the mother who threw herself in my arms. And the mother said that they were waiting for the folks from their church, right? And I said that I would be on duty till 8 o'clock that next morning. And if they needed me, all they had to do was call me, and that I would come up and check on them later, no matter what. But if they needed me sooner, they could get me. And my beeper went off again. And it was the emergency room again. And I went back downstairs, and it was the guy who wanted to kill himself. And he really had gone home, and he really had gotten his partner. right? So we got them social work people to come and talk to them. And they started talking about how they couldn't go to church anymore. And I said, well, where did you used to go to church? And they were talking about this holiness church that they used to go to, which meant that I couldn't send them to a UU church because they believed in Jesus. And it's one of the things that has always bothered me about us, that we don't make enough room for Christians so that they feel okay about coming to our churches. But I did find, because I had been hunting for them, the evangelical LGBTQIA church in the Triad, because the Winston-Salem, Greensboro, High Point are called the Triad. They're smaller than the Triangle, but they have a lot of other schools and stuff going on there. But they had a significant enough LGBTQ population that they actually had a church. And the church was in Winston-Salem, and it was the church that the UUs used to use till the UUs bought a building, and our congregation in Winston-Salem sold the church to the LGBTQ church, evangelical church. So I sent them to that church. I said, look, you'll be welcome here. You'll be okay. You'll be all right there. So we got them social services and other stuff. And so I ran back upstairs to see what was going on with this woman. So when I got up there, the family had come out of her room. She was stable. She wasn't declining. She was stable. And their pastor from their church was there. And so I said, I'm glad that you have someone here. I'm still on call till 8 o'clock. If anything changes, let me know. Right? So I turn to go and I hear footsteps behind me, and it's the mother. And she comes over and she holds my hand. She says, I just want to thank you for being here. As soon as you walked into the room, I was okay because I saw the Lord in your face.
Oh,
And I was like, oh boy. I mean, I managed to say thank you, but I was like, what did she see? I was just like, what is this about? Right. And it kept me up like half the night. And so like my supervisor, you're only supposed to see your supervisor once a week in CPE. Yeah. I lived in his office. I'm sure that man was so tired of me. He didn't know what to do. I made it my business to go to his office that day. And I said, something happened last night that I have to talk to you about. And I told him the story. And he said, well, that doesn't surprise me because we're never alone when we go in those rooms. And I was like, of course we're not. And I knew that. There's a part of me that knew that because I've always had this sense that I'm not walking alone in what I do, but I had not put them together before then. And when I realized that I was never going in those rooms alone, that God or spirit or whatever name we want to give it is walking in the room with me, and I am just the hands and the feet and the conduit for that message, I was never really afraid again. I stopped crying and I finished my unit, but it changed everything for me. It changed everything for me. I've never forgotten her. I wonder how they are. Because that woman got up and walked out of that hospital.
Yeah.
She went from dying to getting up and walking out of the hospital. And TJ will probably confirm this. The weirdest thing about CPE is that people who you are sure are going to die get up out of that hospital and they go home. And people you are sure are going to get up out of that hospital and go home are dead before you get back to them. Yeah. That was the hardest thing for me. People I would come and visit and establish relationships with because they'd be lingering for a while. And then I'd come on the ward and their bed would be empty. That's hard. That's hard. So has that been your experience too, TJ?
Well, I think the one for me, I was like it sounds terrible and I don't mean it, but like I had a tendency to have people die. I was just with so many people who died. Like,
well, see, it depends on what ward you're on too.
I know,
right?
I was on the ICU, so it was just.
Yes. So yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I was on a cancer COPD AIDS ward.
Yeah. I did. So I had two wards. I had ICU and then I had rehab. not chemical dependency rehab, like physical rehab.
Physical rehab, yep,
So some of those folks I got to know for like a whole month or 6 weeks.
right,
We also called it the motorcycle unit. A
Yeah.
lot of motorcycle injuries. So I got to see people who had sort of long-term progress. So that was nice because it was interposed with the bloodbath of ICU.
Yep.
And so the other thing for me that was really, I mean, I had some really powerful experiences, but one of the ones that stuck out was the Pacific Northwest was being ravaged by opiates, and the number of young people dying needlessly. I mean,
yep,
and I remember in the same, I had like 2 rooms right next to each other, and you know, I was basically arranging showings of a body that was just brought in for families, and it holding the space in a senseless death that
Yeah.
seems senseless, or somehow to families seems so unfair and so powerless. So when you were talking about the powerlessness of human hands or human actions, I think that day going literally back and forth between 2 rooms and 2 different families suffering the same thing, and
Whew.
I think for me that was one of them. I mean, that day I'll never forget. I'll never forget the looks. What people don't realize, I think, is that I will never. I could sketch those rooms today.
Yep,
The looks on their faces, what people were wearing, how they were behaving. It's just so, it's indelible.
Yeah.
And then I remember one, and I've shared this before in a sermon, and I don't really know what to say about it, but I was sitting with so the thing that you learn about in CPE is that one of the big things I wrote about is that we do not treat mothers fairly in this world. The way mothers have to behave, are made to behave for their children or spouses, it was like people have different voices. They'd speak one way when the child or grandchild was in the room, and then they'd leave, and they almost had a different voice when they talked to me. And one of those patients who just would speak freely when her daughter or grandson wasn't there was just telling me like how worried she was for all this. She didn't want to die because it would upset them so much. I mean, she was right on the edge. And I remember the grandson had to go do something and like go put money in a meter or something. And she chose that moment to die.
that's right.
And when she
Absolutely.
did, she literally like kind of looked up, and she hadn't been moving, and she put her hand out and kind of reached for something, and then just died like you'd see in a movie. And her daughter was in the room, and she looked at me and she's like, "Did you see that? Like, am I crazy?" I was like, "No, she was looking at something and touching it, and then just peacefully died." And then the grandson came back in, and his mom told him she didn't want to die with you in the room. She couldn't, and she didn't want you to have that experience. So I think like the power of the human spirit and the determination that people really do have right up until the end, not everyone, but some, was wild. And what came out for me is I went into CPE thinking death is this hugely important, amazing, transformative thing. And then I realized it is just the most common thing. Mm-hmm. And my response to that was to enjoy life that much more. I thought I was enjoying life because death was such a big deal, but I realized by making death a big deal, I'm robbing myself of the life I'm living. And that was the shift.
That's right. That's right. And you know, it's interesting that you talked about her dying after the grandson left the room. There are studies, just whole studies about 35% of mothers will not die till their kids leave the room.
Yeah.
They go get a cup of coffee, you know, like you tell mom you're going to get a cup of coffee, and mom's gone before when you get back. because she doesn't want you there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's all this family dynamic stuff like that. My mother died with 14 of us in the room, which is how she lived, frankly. There was like children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, people eating, sleeping, talking, playing video games. And it reminded me of how when we would all be home for Thanksgiving, right? My mom would take a nap on the couch and we'd all be just running around like my sister's kids, and people are like watching a football game. And I could never understand how my mother could sleep with all that noise, right? But she could, because it was all of her people around her. And so look, the nurse was coming in and he'd say, every time I come in here, there's more of you. Because like we'd be arriving, because I was with her when I could tell she was dying, and I was calling my sister and waking up my sister. I said, if you want to be here, you need to come now. I had a brother in Boston who had just left. So he wasn't going to be able to get back, but my other brother was in town and the grandchildren were somewhere else. And so everybody was kind of convening on the University of Chicago hospitals. And so the poor nurse, every time the nurse would come back in, more of us would be getting there. And so when my mom finally died, there were 14 of us in the room.
Wow.
Because that's how she lived.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that reminds me of one of the patients I had, she couldn't have children, I guess. And so it was funny, I'd come in and her family would be there and no one looked like anyone else, but she'd adopted 11 kids. And so you had,
that's so great.
you had these tall, orange, spiky haired kids. And then you had like these little brown kids and just like this huge mishmash. And she died with all of them there. And it was like a joyful experience. Yeah. They knew she was going. She had plenty of notice. They were doing the morning. They were all holding each other. She had made a family of 11 children, and it was, so yeah, I know. Who thought we were going to talk about CPE?
I was just going to say, I know y'all didn't go on here thinking we were going to talk about this.
But this is real. This is where the rubber meets the road. So.
It really is. But it's those things that made it possible for me to be a congregational minister. I don't think I would have been able to do it otherwise. So that my first year, I had a cranky man in my car. He just delighted in being like shooting me down about anything he was doing. He was actually a dear, sweet, wonderful person. As we got to know each other. But it started with him being cranky all the time. And so I went home for Thanksgiving. I came back and he walked into church and said, I was in the ICU over Thanksgiving. I said, did you call the church? He said, no, why would I call the church? And I looked at him and I said, don't you ever go into the hospital again and not tell us, ever. And he kind of looked at me like, this woman's crazy. He didn't have anybody else in the world. He was all alone in the world.
Was that in Montclair?
No, this was in New York City.
New York, okay.
And I was like, don't you dare.
Okay.
We all know you. Some of us love you. I wasn't sure how I felt, but I wasn't going. I did love him dearly. By the end, I totally loved him. And he would go to nursing homes because he was not able to take care of himself, and they get him until he was able to function. And then they'd send him back to his apartment, which was like a hoarder's paradise. And so one day he went into the hallway and fell down, right? And they called the police and they called me. And because I lived very near him, I walked over to where he was and I'm sitting next to him while he's on the floor, right? Because he's still on the floor when I get there. And he's like, I only fell because I can't stay here. And I'm like, oh my God, why did you do that? But he was making sure he was safe. So they took him back, He was a scream. He was a total scream. But I couldn't have done any of those things if I had not had that experience first. I think that every minister, whether they're going to do parish ministry or not, it's something I recommend that they do. I can't make them do it, I think the MFC can kind of make them do it. and they should. And believe it or not, we are one of the few denominations / associations that require CPE.
Wow.
People go into, there are people who go into ministry who have never been near a person who has died.
Yep.
And I was shocked. I didn't know that. I went to a Methodist seminary, and when they had CPE day to recruit people locally, I just wanted to go to see. And everybody's laughing at me because I'm the only UU in the school, and me and the Episcopalians are the only people at this gathering because we were the only people who had to do it.
Yep. Yeah, if people kind of giggled, and I say when I got to seminary, Bill Gettler, the sort of career kind of professional observer, he
Right.
said, he goes, it's the Unitarians and the Lutherans that have the most amount of work to do, the most formation, the most time, the most hoops to jump through. It's for different reasons, but
Right.
like Unitarians, it used to be so many people start the process, and then the attrition is so high that they had to have all the hoops. But yeah, it's a lot of preparation, and
The Presbyterians have more to translate though.
yeah. Yep, they have to take all their Greek and their Latin
And exams and write papers. And I'm like, oh no, give me CPE all day. I'm not doing Greek.
Yep.
Can I ask a question? Did the pandemic affect the program for the students?
Well, not for us. And I'll tell you why. Since 2001, Star King has had an online component of some kind.
Oh, okay.
Before there was Zoom, there was asynchronous, communication. This is before the internet, really. There were like, listservs that we would teach people.
I was talking about the CPE program, though.
Oh, well, you know what? People did virtual CPE.
Oh, okay. That's
They
what I was
did.
curious.
They
Yeah.
did.
Not
And
the
that's
same,
continuing. That's continuing.
not the same though, right?
It's not the same, but people who want to speak to someone
Right.
are going to speak to someone in whatever way we can make available to them,
Okay.
because things are weighing on their spirit.
Right.
And it's weighing on family spirit. So maybe you're not talking to the person, you're talking to the family who is struggling with something.
Okay.
If you can get past the part where people think if you're talking to a chaplain, you're going to die, which was just the most common thing in the world. I'd walk into rooms and people would start screaming. And literally, this woman started screaming and said, I didn't think I was that sick. I'm like, you're not that sick. I just came because I'm making rounds. Right. I mean, it was ridiculous. But for people who have a need, a spiritual need, a question, thoughts, if a family, like one person I had to go see because the wife thought that him having this stent put in was putting him at risk. And because he wasn't a Christian, she was worried about his immortal soul. So she wanted me to go in and save him. And I said, I can't do that. I said, but I can talk to him. And so I went in and he looked at me and he said, my wife sent you in here, didn't she? And I said, yes. And it turned out we had this wonderful conversation. So I could truthfully say when I came out that, we had explored all these questions and he was at peace, right? But that's because I didn't try to make him confess his belief in his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, which is what she wanted me to do. So,
well, you know what? We are at about 5 minutes to go.
Uh-oh, I'm sorry, folks.
No, that's fine. We
went in this whole other direction.
It's good. It's good to hear, the heart of things, and what matters. But I think I would like it if you could tell my folks something they should kind of hold as they're going through this kind of transition process. So what would you tell a congregation kind of, rather than just the searching, about like being together and staying together and things like that?
I think that all the love that you all have shared in all of the beauty of Hawaii and all of the strain of the pandemic and all of the surprise at TJ leaving and the uncertainty about the future, I think you all have one another in care in a way that you can trust. And I say that because I've met you all, and you all love and care for each other in a really unique way. And maybe it's the island spirit, and it's maybe just who you all are and what kind of creativity you all have brought to things and what TJ has helped to give you. But even though it feels uncertain to you, I believe that you will be fine, that you all will hold each other, and that you will welcome whoever comes as your interim, and that you will work with them together and shape what you believe will be your next chapter. And you'll attract the minister who will love you and that you can love. I really believe that.
Me too. Well, on that note, I think it's been a wonderful few years of Pauhanas, and I want to thank everyone for the time. I don't know what the fate of future Pauhanas are, but this exact address will stay open if Reverend Slack or Dr. Michelle want to use it. I'm not sure how that will go, but
Who is coming as your interim, if I might ask? Do you know?
So Reverend Slack, Michael Slack will be here for July and August as the summer minister, and
You're gonna have a ball. Michael's on my board, so I know you're gonna have a good time this summer.
yeah. So he's going to join us for worship team tomorrow and get things all kind of shaped up. And Dr. Michelle Townsend Grove is here for June. She's our consulting religious educator, and the search team is hard at work finding someone for.
All right, so it's too early for you all to have had someone yet. Yeah. Okay.
So, but Reverend Slack is going to be great. So
you're going to have such a wonderful time. He is a person of such deep spirit and such great humor. You will have such a good time.
And he's bringing Zora for July.
Oh my God, you get Zora too? Wait till y'all meet Zora.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
She is her own little entity all by herself.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a wonderful time.
We have some beautiful entities that I'm hoping she can coalesce with. So, so that's what's happening, and so I think a lot of good hands and good hearts are already being laid to the people. So I think it's going to be good. So yeah,
I think so too.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you all for how welcoming you all have been to me from my very first moment of showing up at the church and doing these Pauhanas. And I'm honored to have been the final person. And I wish blessings and love on you, TJ. I'll see you at GA while you're slinking through the halls or whatever you're doing, trying to get away from meetings. And whoever else is going to be there, if I don't see you and you see me, come say hi.
I'll definitely say hi to you once there.
Okay.
Well, thanks everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks again. I'll see everyone sometime over the weekend, hopefully. And if not, then many blessings to you. So thank you.
Blessings, everyone.
Hey, TJ.
Yeah.
Would it be appropriate to